Elder Richards then proceeded to address the conference. It was highly needful that the people should, on such occasions as this, be instructed upon those things it was important they should know. Without the aid of the Spirit of truth, efforts in that direction would be in vain. The work we are engaged in and our relationship to the rest of the human family are unique. Existing circumstances are calculated to excite in us the most intense sensibilities, also to arouse us to an acute contemplation of our relationship to each other and the world at large. Many are doubtless filled with sorrow and apprehension on account of the treatment of their parents and brothers by the courts. But we are living in peculiar times, when all things seem to be rushing on to some unseen goal. All things appear to be spurred into remarkable activity. Journalism keeps issues at fever heat. The developments of science were making such strides that sluggards were compelled to step out of the way. The speaker referred to the remarkable advancements made in the matter of facilities for rapid travel. This reminded one of the saying of the Lord, through one of the prophets, to the effect that he would hasten his work in its time. It would transpire, however, that what was now being passed through would in the future be looked back upon as one of the most interesting epochs ever experienced. Some of the most unpleasant medicines to the palate are the most beneficial in their effects. About 50 years ago, the congregation of the saints in Ohio was few in numbers, gathered within the walls of a small schoolhouse. Now, behold the spectacle of this great people becoming so numerous. The progress made was an exemplification of the correctness of the parable given by the Lord concerning the mustard seed. Changes were going on in all nature, and so it is with the work of God. When this work was but a small branch in Colville or elsewhere, it appeared but a limited affair. When the church was organized on the 6th of April, 1830, it was announced that 2 men had been ordained to the Melchizedek priesthood by Peter, James, and John. These were Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery. Oliver ordained Joseph to be the first apostle of the last dispensation, and Joseph, in turn, ordained Oliver to be the second. The speaker then gave some interesting details concerning the gradual establishment of the quorums of the priesthood and the development of its organization. Also, the growth of a knowledge of principle, line upon line, and precept upon precept. He made special mention of Thomas B. Marsh, formerly president of the 12, and Martin Harris, one of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon. They fell away in an early day and came back many years after. While they were severed, they made no progress. When they returned, they showed that not a forward step had been made by them. So it was with all apostates. Those who remained faithful, however, progressed as the work enlarged and advanced. The speaker followed up this theme of progress through the difficult phases of life, of its onward march to the present stage of it, when about 30 stakes were organized and in operation. It was by virtue of the union of the saints that they had this strength. It was this consolation that was so distasteful to our enemies, especially when it was exhibited by going to the polls and depositing votes for the men in their midst. Elder Richards said he wished to depart from the thread of his discourse and say something regarding our father Adam. He lately heard a preacher say something that was an imputation against the character of our first parent. Adam, according to the word of the Lord upon the subject, did not sin, but the woman did. This brought the first man face to face with a serious problem, whether he should take a course to redeem the woman from the effects of her act, or live eternally alone without her. He took the very best step that could be taken under the circumstances. Elder Richards resumed the subject of the progress that had been made in exercising the authority and performing the functions and duties of the priesthood. He advised that the quorums of high councils and bishops' courts be kept full. He explained the difference between members of the councils of the stakes and alternate high counselors. The former were high counselors of the stake, and alternates were high counselors in the stake. It was within the province of the high councils of stakes not only to adjudicate upon disagreements among brethren and offenses against the laws of the church, but also to decide upon differences in relation to doctrine. Many other points of a similar nature, which can scarcely be incorporated in a synopsis, were elucidated by the speaker. Special attention was given by him to the powers of the priesthood in its various quorums and courts. In speaking of the patriarchal office, Elder Richards expressed doubt that the people generally appreciated it. He even had some doubt as to whether the patriarchs themselves appreciated their calling. There was a general patriarch of the church, and a number of other patriarchs who were called to act in that capacity over their posterity, and who were under the presidency of the General Patriarch. Those generally who held the patriarchal office were urged to seek the spirit of their calling, and the presiding patriarch was urged to ascertain who the others were who held the office and look after them. The saints were remiss in many particulars. They had sold their inheritance to those who were opposed to them, had married among the same class also, and fostered them in their business enterprises, furnishing them with means that had since been used to oppose the saints. The people should repent of these things and support their friends. It was within the power of the saints to increase their faith and power and the presence of the gifts among them by the observance of what God required of them. The revelations given by the Almighty should be studied carefully as a guide, and if the saints would do their duty under all circumstances, they would be prospered. Those things which were intended for evil would prove blessings, just as the experience of the past months already demonstrated. The young among the people had been led to study the laws of the country and know what their rights were, and many other lessons necessary for those who are in a future time destined to rule, invoked the blessing of the Almighty upon the congregation. The annual meeting of the YMMIA was announced for 7:30 this evening, when it was promised that an epistle from President Woodruff would be read.